Good evening and welcome to SIMRACERS Revival. We are here at Monaco today for the third round of the F1 1984 Masters Championship. Drivers are already out on track doing their practice laps in their very, very noisy cars, as you might expect. But we are set for an interesting round around Monaco. Not a lot of passing is to be had, and these turbo cars versus naturally aspirated cars is sure to be a very interesting match around Monaco. Can you keep the horsepower under control for the majority of this circuit? Very tight turns. There's only a couple of parts of the circuit where you can really stretch these cars, but it's very, very difficult. So we are set for what could be a very interesting Grand Prix. I'm just looking up my regs now to see what we've got for the regulations as in terms of laps, because I had it set to 75 minutes. It's not 75 minutes, it's 45 laps of this circuit. So 45 laps around Monaco, which is a tall ask for a lot of these drivers, and particularly in these cars, but we will see what happens. So these cars in general, if we have a look at what these drivers have got available to them, as I say, is a mix between turbo cars and naturally aspirated for the 1984 season. And so we do have qualifying modes and race modes, so they both have their advantages and disadvantages for qualification and the race. So fuel consumption and power, so it's a bit of a balance when you actually use it. So fill the car up and hope for the best. Now, we're not expecting any mandatory pit stops today, but we did see that a couple of people last time out were possibly going to try and do a one stop, but didn't end up doing it and played it a little bit safe, otherwise they might have got left behind. So in terms of where we are in the season, so if we have a look at the schedule, so we've done 2 rounds so far. I unfortunately wasn't here on board for the first round at Jarama, but I was here for the last round at Buenos Aires, which was a stunning Grand Prix. It was action all the way through, all the way up until the end. The top 3 was not settled near the end of the race, so it was a bit of a grandstand finish. So we're here in Monaco today. We're using the modern circuit, and it hasn't changed an awful lot in the last 50 or so years. It's been around since 1950 on the Grand Prix circuit, so only missed a couple of rounds here there. But we're set to go to Silverstone on the 13th of April, and then on the 27th of April we're going to go to the long straights of Hockenheim in Germany. Then we head to the Temple of Speed in Italy for Monza on the 11th of May, and then our last round, which was usually the last round for a number of years, in the 90s, Adelaide, the street circuit, so the 8th of June. So that should be fun. Looking forward to that. So in terms of what we got in store for today, so we've got 45 laps of this circuit. So let's have a look at possibly seeing what our drivers have got in store for us on the track. So, currently seeing a Renault coming around the last corner. Let's see if we can get our timing up for you so we can see who is who and what they're doing. So, around the tight hairpin, one of the slowest corners of the track. Turn 6, then we come down towards the tunnel. So, we're currently watching Camp in the Tyrrell. So coming down towards the hairpin, this Renault, one of the most powerful cars in the 1984 season. It was very unreliable back then because turbos were not really reliable at that point. They were the first car to introduce turbos, and then everyone had to follow suit. But they did become standard, but then they got banned a bit later on because they were becoming a bit too fast and probably a bit too expensive. So So the key about Monaco is obviously controlled aggression. These drivers have got to keep themselves out of the wall whilst staying as quick as possible. So through the final turn, the Anthony Nogues section, and up the... You can't really call it a straight, can you? It's mainly a curve. It looks like Becky Ely Clark is just recovering from a little spin just before the tunnel. And Shurekamp is recovering from a spin out the hairpin. You've got to be very careful with the hairpin, because you can get beached on that curb if you're not careful. So I'm expecting a lot of action today. 45 laps around here. It does go very, very quickly before you're noticing. But we've got just under 3 minutes to go of practice. And then the drivers are going to have 25 minutes of qualification. So there's plenty of time to get out there and get some space. You don't really want to be stuck behind another car around Monaco when you're trying to do a qualification lap. So put on your soft tyres and away you go. So coming through the swimming pool section. Hold on for dear life through the chicane. So that's 15 and 16 and up to the Rascasse. I call it a hairpin, but it doesn't really seem tight enough to be a hairpin. Then you got a slight, go over a slight crest at the end of the lap and down the main straight. Got to avoid that pit exit, because pit cars or pitting out cars coming out the end of pit lane will feed directly into traffic. So you got to keep a wide line, so you can't go down the right hand side of the straight. So at the moment, currently setting a practice pace is, I always stumble over this name, Salvaggio, 117.9, with Ely Clark not far behind. That's 0.05 of a second, so very close times in the top. And then we got Bogle in third, just 1.5 tenths behind. With Messing in fourth, a little bit more time to find, so nearly 7/8 tenths of a second to find in practice. But you can't guarantee that a lot of people are using their qualification setups. They might be doing race runs at this point. But we'll have to see. It does look like someone at the bottom of the list has possibly joined with another name we're not expecting. So I don't know who the driver Your Name is. So we might be able to tell by the car, but I'm not entirely sure as yet. So as far as last week goes, so we were at Buenos Aires last week, and it was a stunning Grand Prix where it wasn't settled up until the final pit stop phase. We had the top two that were pitting nearly together, and then someone was, I think our championship leader was out for the majority, and he kind of thought that he could hold on, but the provisional leaders, Ely Clark and I believe it was Vito Martino, were hunting him down. So currently our championship leader. Let's actually have a look at the points. So our season standings as they are at the moment. So it is Michael Stoy, which has won the first 2 rounds, and that's the driver I was talking about. So he tried to stay out as long as possible, but Vito Martino and Ely Clark were catching on, but it did get a little messy at the end with unfortunately Ely Clark and Martino coming together, but I don't think anything happened in the steward's room about that. It was just a racing incident. Ely Clark did get it out of shape coming out the final corner, and this led to Martino unfortunately trying to fit into a gap that wasn't big enough for his Arrows BMW. So we're heading off into qualification, and let's see what our drivers have in store. So let's see if Story can actually bring himself up to 3 wins on the bounce. I'm not seeing him in the list, so could there be some points on the table for the other drivers? We're seeing a Lotus popping out in front of that Renault there. I don't think that Renault was expecting that Lotus to come out the pits just then, but It looks like Ely Clark is the first out of the pits. So that will be Salavaggio that had come out just behind, perhaps. It is indeed. So I currently top the times in practice. So maybe a Monaco specialist. So over that little bump. That bump seems to be quite softened quite a bit from what I remember. I remember drivers had to avoid that bump coming down the hill as they head to turn 6 in the hairpin, and then through Mirabeau turn 7, and then Portier turn 8, and through the tunnel turn 9, all the way down to turn 10. So braking hard over a crest and down the hill to the Nouvelle chicane of 10 and 11, then up to turn 12 of the Tabac corner. So these drivers possibly want to get a little bit of space. They are quite grouped together. And you don't want to overheat those soft tyres either. That would be a bad thing. So Salavaggio just getting a little bit of space from the car in front and hoping to just step on it out of the last Anthony Nose corner and up the straight. We don't really want any of that waiting around like we got in modern Formula 1, but down to turn 1. Try not to clip too much the curb and push you into the Armco barrier up the hill. Slightly off camber, dips a little, but Ely Clark coming down to the hairpin for the first time on her first qualifying run. Keeps it very tight, and down the hill towards the tunnel. Salavaggio also doing the same thing. He's the fastest in the first sector, purple sector. And we come through the tunnel for the first time. And then you come out into the sunlight. It's quite a shock. So braking distances are quite short for that corner down into the chicane. I'm wondering, where are they braking, before the crest or after the crest? So Ely Clark is the first to come across the line, and Salavaggio pushing it just a little bit too hard, and that looks like frustration to me, stepping on the throttle and spinning himself around. Now that might be the end of his quali, because he has quit back to the pits. So Sim Racers Revival, you do have to do an out lap, a fast lap and an in lap, so that looks like qualification over. Bogle getting slightly impatient with wanting to get past that Tyrrell, or is that a Spirit Honda? That might be a Tyrrell or a Spirit Honda, I can never tell the difference. So Ely Clark currently tops the times at 1:16.7, so some people were doing their race runs in practice and they suddenly unleashed the turbo power, the qualification power of these engines and these cars. So currently leading from Neuenkopf, 1.8 seconds. That's slightly untidy coming into the chicane at the bottom of the hill. Through to back and through the Louis Chiron chicane, as it's currently named, through the swimming pool section. 15 and 16 up to Vasquez, number 17. So slightly early turn-in. I think she possibly, if that was a fast lap, she's now abandoned it because made a few mistakes there, and it looks like there's no pit limit either. So that's drivers going to have to be very careful when they come into the pits. So quick pit stop for Ely Clark, but Neuenhoff possibly wants to put in a stunning lap here, but 1.8 seconds is a lot, so maybe they're just working up to it, maybe warming themselves up a bit. 20 minutes to go in qualification. So Schuerkamp's currently in third at the moment. Neuenhoff on a quick lap, first sector, 21.3, not far off the fastest time. Down to the tunnel section. Now, I've driven Monaco before, of course, and It's always a little bit of a shock if you come through the tunnel section. You suddenly find a slower car, but so when you had 5 drivers being able to put a time in, we know that a couple have gone back to the pits and they won't take any further part in qualification, which means they will be starting down the back. It's a nice power slide coming out the final corner. I can't imagine that's the quickest way around that corner, but so Nieuwenhof coming across the line. Is this more representative? So he gets a little bit closer with 1.2 seconds. So traffic in the tunnel. Schuerkamp still in third, still trying to put a lap in, the personal best in the first sector. I'm trying to see who that is behind them. I think that's Prukemarker. No, indeed, that's a McLaren. That can't be Prukemarker. I think that's Messing. So again, Salavaggio is back out on the circuit. So I'm wondering whether that rule still applies for Monaco. Perhaps not. Because Salavaggio, we did see him quit out on circuit. So going for another run, we'll have to see whether the stewards agree with that or not. But meanwhile, Ely Clark still putting in the purple sectors. The gap for provisional pole is down to now 1 second, so they're getting closer. So Ely Clark wants to push that provisional pole even further away. And we know that if you've watched Formula 1 before, track position at Monaco is very important indeed. Passing is extremely difficult. So Salavaggio coming across the line. Goes up to second place. Now it's down to 0.7 of a second. So Ely Clark, unless she can push this lap time even further away, it looks like this is a even faster time. So she's fastest of all in the second sector. 34.8. So quite tidy through the last chicane, down the hill. Slight wiggle as she goes across the line. So indeed, she just did push it even further away. It's now 1.4 seconds. So she's got that Lotus hooked up. Maximum downforce and maximum boost. So 17 minutes to go. It's Ely Clark from Salavaggio, Nieuwenhof, Schuerkamp, Borweg in 5th, Bogle in 6th, Rotter in 7th, or maybe that's Rosa in 7th, Messing 8th. The first of the drivers not to set a time. So it looks like there's trouble in the final. Yeah, Nieuwenhof went around, so he had abandoned that lap and is coming into the pits. Unfortunately, he was expected to go a little faster there and stalled his engine. The engine looked like it was overheating as well. He was probably stationary for too much time and the engine overheated. So our drivers do have the opportunity to use different tyres. So I would imagine that a lot of people are on the softest tyre for qualification. There is a mixture of strategies here though. Maybe a few people are more comfortable on the medium tyre. So the medium tyre is a yellow tyre. The red tyre is a soft tyre. So a mixture of approaches for this qualification session. And it does look like a couple of people are doing at least a couple of fast laps. And then coming back into the pits. But now Matthias Bogle is now bouncing off the barrier. That's not the fastest way around the circuit. That's possibly suspension damage. That's the last thing you want to do around Monaco, is to be carrying any kind of damage. So Bogle now up to second, but still 1.4 drift of Ely Clark, who's got that Lotus hooked up. So Lotus on the front row at the moment, and then a Renault. So it's a slight yellow in sector 1, but I think it's all been solved now. Oh, it's Salavaggio again. He's come to a halt at that's turn 1. So again, he's spun around turn 1 and he's quit back to the pits. So Martino has now arrived. So our third place from last time at Buenos Aires is now 0.5 away from pole, as we're looking at Andy D in the Ferrari. The first time we've seen the Ferrari this session. So Andy D unfortunately did retire from last week's Grand Prix, or 2 weeks ago rather. I always think it's a week ago, but I think he was one of the drivers that had engine trouble. We did see a Ferrari on fire, and unfortunately Andy D was that Ferrari. So Ely, Clark, Martino, Bogle, Salavaggio, Neuenhoff. That is the top 5. Ely Clark getting a little bit wrong coming down to the hairpin. Just going to have to be very careful joining the track. So the Miro hairpin, and then around the what was called the was it the casino hairpin? I can't remember the exact name of it. It had a little bit of a different name. The Grand Hotel hairpin, that's the one. They did have a different name further back. So Neuenhoff just trying to get a little bit of space, hoping that he doesn't catch a slower car. So Ely Clark pushing on their outlap. So perhaps want to get a look at our third place runner. He led early on. It looks like he's coming to a stop in the tunnel. Offline though, so he doesn't worry anybody else, thankfully. So here's Messing currently in 6th place. He ran along the curb there, couldn't quite get off the curb, and it meant that he couldn't quite slow down how he wanted and spun around into the chicane. That's Renault letting Renault through as we join Ely Clark. Unfortunately catching a Tyrrell in front. I'm not sure who that Tyrrell is. That is 12th place Rosa. But it looks like she might be far enough back to not get too worried about that car. But Rosa hasn't put a representative time in as yet. So we have 13 drivers out on track at the moment. It seems very, very busy. But that is Monaco for you. It always seems like there are cars running every stretch of the track. Coming up to turn 1, that is a blown Renault engine, so Neuenhoff pushing a little bit too hard and overheating their engine, so maybe closing the radiator a little too far. But hopefully there is no one, but it doesn't look like on the track map that anyone is behind, so he can come back to the pits safely and maybe open that radiator a little. So Ely Clark still following this Tyrrell, not putting any personal bests in, so she is 0.5 of a second clear, but I'm not sure that's safe with just under 11 minutes to go. So Neuenhoff, I just saw on the track map that maybe came to grief in the first corner, but it's got going again. Trying to put down the power as quick as possible, but couldn't quite put all that horsepower down coming off that curb. Now Ely Clark has a little bit of space now. She backed off in that later section of the lap. It's now kicking on, so we join Martino in the Arrows BMW. Possibly a purple sector in the first sector. Slightly wide entry to the last corner though. Sounded like it missing a gear there as well. Couldn't quite get the gear he wanted to coming up the straight. But still 0.5 seconds behind Ely Clark, who's setting the pace at the moment. Salavaggio, a lot of trouble in this qualification session, but he's still in 4th. So just under 10 minutes to go. It's Ely Clark, Martino, Bogle, Salavaggio and Rosa now up to 5th place. So the top 5 covered by just under 1.5 seconds. So Lotus Renault, the Colin Chapman special. It's a little bit of a better exit from Ely Clark. Still a little bit of a wiggle, so it's not comfortable, this car, to drive at the limit. So Martino, he was fastest in the first sector, but unfortunately down in the second. So hoping to get a little bit closer. His target time is now 1:16.1. So those practice times in the 1:17s were possibly race fuel. I thought there was going to be a Scandinavian flick going into that hairpin there, but not quite. So car looks like a real handful at slow speed. He's just trying to get that horsepower down onto the tarmac. That's the problem. So coming through the swimming pool section and down to chicane 15 and 16. And up to the Rascasse. And through the Anthony Nogues corner. And down towards the finishing line. Start another lap. So the finishing line is quite late on that straight. So we look at Prukenmacher. Spinning a half spin in his Tyrrell. That's a lot of curb for Messing. Seemed to get away with it though. And a lot of curb on the exit as well, so he's pushing hard. Seems to have a lot of understeer. Salavaggio still pushing on in 3rd. He's not troubling the timesheets in the first sector, so this lap is probably a little bit of a waste. But Ely Clark still setting the pace. So I'd imagine this is probably one of the going to be the hardest circuit on the calendar for these drivers, particularly in these turbo cars. There was only a, I would say Ely Clark, I think there was a misshift there. It sounded like she went down a gear to in the middle of the when she was supposed to be speeding up and lit the tyres up. So I think perhaps the damage model is turned down just a little bit for Monaco, just for these drivers to survive. Because the last thing you want is a slight touch of the barrier and ending up with all of your wheels off your wagon, as they say. I am intrigued to know who this driver is in the Williams Honda. If I look down my list, so we have 2. That might be Michael Volker. It depends what Williams Honda that is. Yes, that will be Michael Volker. Let's see if I can edit that on the fly, because the last thing we want is someone on the tower that we don't know who it is. So we're coming down to the last 5 minutes of qualification. course, Michael Volker, last time out, looking at my cheat sheet, Michael Volker was actually the first, or the last of the DNFs. I can't remember, it doesn't give a reason of why the DNF happened, but we did have a few people suffering from engine blow-ups. Alright, so Ely Clark still at the top. That half second is still hard to beat. So she's got this car hooked up. It still doesn't look very comfortable to drive. But still, with only just under 4 minutes to go, still time to put in at least 3 laps or so through the swimming pool section down to the chicane. I wonder if that little bollard there is possibly doesn't have a collision on it. I would expect that it would have been knocked off the chicane by now. But you don't want to cut too much curb through that chicane. So Ely Clark, Martino, Salavaggio, Bogle, Rosa, that is your top 5. Nieuwenhof is now dropped out of the top 5. Into 6th place, Julian Kerr in 7th. Messing now dropped down to 8th. Schuerkamp 9th. D is in 10th. Bolveg is in 11th. Volker now with a corrected name is in 12th. And Pukemaker, or Pukemaker, I'm going to have to ask how he pronounces his name, in the Tyrrell in 13th place. Unfortunately a little bit off the place, so a bit of pace to find in the race, and I think 45 laps around this circuit is certainly going to give these drivers an idea of how close they are to the pace. So 45 laps is a long time at Monaco. Just over 2 minutes to go. Martino still trying to get anywhere towards Ely Clark. So taking a little bit of a wide entry to the hairpin and using some curb on the outside. Salavaggio still rubbing that Armco on the outside, and that's a very interesting way to do the last part of Monaco. Gets it very, very loose at slow speed. So Salavaggio still stays in 3rd place, so he can't quite eke out that last bit to get any closer to the top 2. So under 2 minutes to go now. So Martino taking a little bit of a breather. He's going to head around this final corner. Unfortunately, took a little bit of a chunk out of that barrier. But he's going to start his lap anyway, so undamaged and unfazed. He's only got 1.5 minutes, so he needs to make it stick. So Salavaggio putting in a good sector at the start. 20.8, so that's pretty much the fastest sector of all. Slightly wide coming out of the chicane. So Ely Clark is not going any slower. So I'm looking at a first sector is slightly slower than Salavaggio, so Salavaggio could put in a blinder here if he gets the last section of the track right. Personal best in the second. Unfortunately, bumps on the way in. I think he's possibly running that car a little stiff. Maybe he thought that was going to work out for him, but Salavaggio has come to grief, and that will be challenge over. Stays in 3rd. Ely Clark, personal best in the 1st, or even purple sector in the 1st. Neat and tidy through the chicane up to the last corner. 22 seconds to go. Small squirt coming up through the Anthony Nogues and up past the line. No improvement, but still a very fast time. Nieuwenhof in 4th. This is his last effort. Personal best in the 2nd sector. Neat and tidy through the chicane as well. Neat and tidy in the last corner, so through the Anthony Nogues. So let's have to see if Nieuwenhof can get any closer to his teammate Salavaggio. He does, he goes up to third. So he was able to nip his teammate. So it's an all Renault second row at the moment. Ely Clark is perhaps not setting a lap here. It is just trying to get more track time. So Julian Kerr in the Skull Bandit Ram Hart. Screamer of an engine. Coming in 7th place. So I think that Julian Kerr is possibly the last driver on the track at the moment. Just coming through the last corner now. Personal bests. So he is a little way off 6th place, so this should improve, but does it improve his position? It does not. But still in 7th place. So a little bit of a gap between 6th and the 7th place for these drivers. But that is the grid set. I don't think anyone's making an improvement. Nieuwenhof is out there as well. But I think he didn't cross the line in order to get another lap in. So he's possibly going to be coming into the pits. He is. So we can set the starting order. So that is quali done. A very interesting session by all accounts. The cameras were focusing on the top 3 because that's where the battle was. Ely Clark was pushing the marker ever further away from the 2 Renaults, and that's how we finish. So we're going to set the starting order, and then I'll give you the starting grid, and we will be all set to race. So, in terms of the starting order, it is as follows. So, Ely Clark led from the start and still ends up in pole with Martino second, Nieuwenhof sharing the second row with Salavaggio, so it's all Renault second row. Then we have Bogle in 5th in the Lotus, Rosa in the Tyrrell in 6th, and Julian Kerr in the Yamaha in 7th. Messing ends up in the McLaren in 8th. Volker in 9th, Schuerkamp in 10th, Andy D in 11th, Bolveg in 12th. And then our last of our qualifiers is Leo Pugamaker. I'm going to pronounce that different every single time, but it is what it is. So, now in terms of what's happening in the race, so 45 laps. 45 laps for our drivers, and we're going to be having a formation lap to a standing start. So what our drivers have got to watch out for is the lead up to turn 1 narrows quite a bit. The barrier on the left hand side does jut out a little bit. It's a little bit of a wider chicane than it was back in the day. So drivers do have the opportunity to take to the escape road down the inside where the pit lane exit is. So drivers will come out of the pits. They will hug the barrier on the right hand side. But as I said, there's no mandatory pit stop. But track position is absolutely key here. So we do have another driver on track who I think has possibly arrived a bit later on. Let's see if we can find Schremser. So Schremser in Lauda's McLaren. I have my cheat sheet down here so I can see who is who. So Schremser, that is indeed his car. So he unfortunately joined us over a bit late, so he's going to join at the back of the grid. So we have now 13 runners. Just wondering why I didn't pick up his name. Maybe I've spelled his name wrong. Looks correct, but we'll have to mess with that another time. So, as the minutes count down, just a reminder that this is a 7-race season, and we are heading all the way through March and April. These races are bi-weekly, so plenty of entertainment. But it's a long old race. We did see a little bit of a, I would say, fatigue setting in last time out at Buenos Aires. And out of the 16 runners, in fact it would have been 15 runners that started the race, we ended up from 9th downwards, unfortunate DNFs. And DNFs do not score in this series, so you need to be on the track at the finish. So it looks like one of our drivers is perhaps trying a practice start. Get that clutch bite point all sorted. So the main DNFs were, we had a couple of engine failures. In fact, 3 engine failures, so we saw a couple of cars on fire. But then we did see a couple of collisions. I think it was Matthias Bogle that went sideways at the start. It was pretty amazing that he came back to 6th place, to be honest. If I'm remembering rightly, we just saw a car spear off on the grid. Far too much wheel spin. And I think a couple of drivers did get caught up in that. But we'll see what happens at Monaco. So drivers have got to be very, very patient. Very, very patient indeed about what they do. So very, very patient. Controlled aggression, I think, is the term I would use. So it's good to be out front. So Ely Clark did probably the most important thing, is to get out front in qualification. Right, we are all set for gridding. So let's see what happens. See if I can get my telemetry to work again, so that I can see all of the stuff. There we go. Right, I can see all my temperatures now. So, through qualification, all those cars running, we managed to get a nice track temperature of 43 degrees. Air temperature is, I wouldn't say it's cold at 22, but it's still relatively cold. And we're not expecting any different weather, so it's going to be dry throughout, unless the admins have decided to make Monaco even harder than it is already. So as I say, there's going to be a formation lap to start, so drivers are going to be able to warm up their tyres. So Ely Clark nearly stalling the Lotus at the start there. So we'll have to see what happens with people warming their tyres as well. Let's have a look on the list to see what people have taken. So medium tyres down the list. Andy D seems to be the only driver on hard tyres back in 10th place. So does he know something we don't? Perhaps trying to go as long as possible, or perhaps trying to get to the end. That is possibly a strategy, but medium tyres for everyone else. So keep an eye on Andy D. So he'll possibly be slow in the first few laps, trying to get those hard tyres to warm up. So he might be, in the end, slowing a few people down behind him, because obviously Monaco is very difficult to pass. But I'm sure some of these drivers can get creative. You've got to think a little bit outside the box. But controlled aggression. Try not to hit the barriers yourself and try not to hit the car in front. Because the last thing you want to do is have any kind of damage going around the streets of Monaco, because it's very difficult already. You don't want to make it into the most difficult race through an accident. So, coming through the swimming pool section, there is a couple of drivers that are weaving just to get a little bit of heat in their tyres, particularly the front. They're going to be sitting on the grid for a little while. So that's Andy Schremser at the back. Joined us in a bit late, missed qualification, but he's joined in 13th place. So Ely Clark coming up to the line, and will stop on the pole. That is Martino alongside. So a couple of drivers hanging back a little bit, getting some heat in their tyres, weaving a little bit, maybe a couple of little burnouts just to get those rear tyres to work. So how much wheel spin are we going to get off the line? So I can see the back of the grid just forming up. That McLaren is the last to come into view and the last row of our drivers. Okay, 5 lights on, and then when they go off, we'll be racing. Off we go. Ely Clark gets a stunning start. Those Renaults are very slow starting behind, so the 2 front runners get away. It looks like maybe there's a change of position back. So the front 2 are away from the pack and clean. I don't see any yellow flags, so well done everyone for getting through the first few turns. So Martino setting about Ely Clark in that Arrows BMW, running slightly wide into the hairpin. But the slower starting Renault is back on the case, so the top 3 are within reach of each other. Usually a little messy around the first time through the hairpin, but everyone is through okay. Right, through the tunnel for the first time. It's Julian Kerr being followed by, I think that is that Schremser? No, that is Messing in the other McLaren. So Nieuwenhof currently in 3rd. There's now a little bit of a gap. So the top 2 seem to be streaking away a little from the rest of the field. So first lap around is Ely Clark currently leading. Martino gets a little bit wide and scrapes along the Armco, which has dropped him back a little. So 13th place, that's Schuerkamp at the back of the field that spun around in the last corner, but it's got going again. Andy D, as I said, on those hard tyres, possibly holding up Bolveg. But it's a good strat, maybe thinking of going long distance, maybe not even stopping at all. We'll see how far those hard tyres aren't. And Bolveg looks like he's very eager to get by as we go on board. Coming down to the hairpin. Bolveg has perhaps got to maybe think about where Andy D is a little bit weaker. So due to that accident or that little scrape of the barrier by Martino, Ely Clark has now got a 2-second lead, so down towards the hairpin. It's very tight through there. Up towards Tower to back corner, you can hear the very low shifting as Bolveg gets it all wrong. So that's unfortunate. It doesn't look like there's any damage, but that is scuppered that battle at the moment. McLaren bouncing off the fence. That does look like that's Schremser ahead of Schuerkamp in the Tyrrell. As Rosa comes up the hill. So Schremser and Schurekamp. So Schremser looks like he's getting away. Schurekamp closes up on the back, but the Renault of Nieuwenhof is chasing Martino, so Martino's falling into the clutches of one of the Renaults. Bogle and Salavaggio are a bit further back, but Bulveg and Andy D do battle again, so even after a little accident, a little scrape with the barrier through stepping on the power too much, it looked like the turbo may have kicked in and gave a bit of oversteer. Looks like he's possibly thinking down into the chicane. I was thinking that Andy is going defensive, and he was. So he's narrowly avoided being passed there. I wonder whether Bulveg may think that he defended and went through the chicane to avoid being overtaken, but battle resumed. We've got Messing and Julian Kerr just behind. Here's a battle for second and third. So Martino has now got a mirror full of a Renault. I did expect that Ely Clark and Martino were going to streak away, but since that little mistake, it's now second and third in battle, along with Andy D and Bulveg coming up the hill for the next time. So hard tyres on that Ferrari versus the Williams on the mediums. So now 30 seconds adrift of the leader. So there's those hard tyres don't look like they've got too much grip. Andy D is already running wide on a couple of the corners, and Bulveg must be thinking, I want to poke my car up the inside, but he's got to be very, very careful where he does it. Using all the steering lock to get round the hairpin as we come down towards the tunnel. Lots of understeer for Bulveg coming through there. To head towards the tunnel for the fourth lap of the race. So he gains a lot coming out the tunnel. He knew where the turbo was going to kick in at the right time, and D could not do anything about that Williams Honda. You saw the overspeed coming over the brow of the hill. It's definitely a nasty place to get the kick in of the turbo, but Bulveg now can be released on those medium tyres. So Salavaggio further back, challenging Bogle for fourth place. So who's behind Bogle? That is Rosa in the Tyrrell. See a McLaren just getting a little bit out of shout just before the bump. That was Messing in the McLaren. So that's 4th, 5th, 6th and 7th all together. So Bogle, Salavaggio, and then Tyrrell of Rosa not far behind. So I believe one of the Tyrrells is a naturally aspirated engine, as he goes a little slightly wide coming through there. And the Renault and the Lotus are definitely turbo. So through this tight section coming up towards the Rascasse. So we saw what happened with the Renaults of power sliding around that last corner. But Martino and the other Renault on track of Nieuwenhof are locked together. Look at the boost coming up the hill. So Nieuwenhof nearly caught himself out. I thought he was going to run wide. But it looked like he gained a lot coming up that straight section. Well, it's not really a straight section, is it? But it's a relatively straight section. So is this Salavaggio now fallen back into the clutches of Rosa in the Tyrrell? That's a car, and perhaps a lapped car letting the drivers through. That's 13th place of Prukemarker. So through the tunnel. Looks like that Renault had a little bit of legs on that Tyrrell coming through the flat out section of the tunnel. Probably a slight lift coming out of the tunnel. So we're seeing 6th place. I think Rosa has possibly gone around out the chicane. It looks like there's been a little bit of a problem with Rosa because he's now dropped back. And he's now going to fall into the clutches of that Ram Hart behind of Julian Kerr. So slight mistake from Rosa that was putting the pressure. Was putting the pressure on Salavaggio in front, but unfortunately he has dropped back. So the lead, Ely Clark is now the leader. He's up to 10 seconds from the battling cars behind. So 7 laps gone of 45. Who will be the first to try and pit? Slight rub at the barrier there, but no particularly harm done. It did look like people could get away with rubbing the barrier a little without too much steering damage. It's not the kind of damage you want at Monaco, but drivers could get away with it. So our first DNF is Messing back in 13th. The McLaren has had problems and he's our first DNF. That's unfortunate. So I'm not sure what happened to Messing. We did see him getting a little out of shape part way around the lap, but so one of the fast and scariest parts of the circuit going through that chicane. Just noticing on our list we've got a penalty for Prukenmacher here. Not sure it would have been not sure if it would have been track limits. You can't get track limits around here, so possibly a pit speeding penalty. But he's currently down in 12th place. He's back in the pits, so possibly it was a pit violation. Is he stopping? I think he is stopping. So, wondering what that is. Be intrigued to know after the race. So, back to the top two. Vito Martino has got Neuenhoff all over him in this first section of the race, while Ely Clark is making hay while the sun shines and is now up to 13 seconds. So it is Lotus. And then we have the Arrows BMW of Martino, and then a Renault in third. So Andy D now being pressured by Schuerkamp. So those hard tyres possibly still causing a little bit of an issue, but he's still sticking with them. Perhaps going for the long stint, or in fact not stopping at all. So we've got to keep an eye on pit stops for these guys. Schuerkamp getting a little bit squiggly coming down into the chicane at the bottom of the hill, which means Andy D can accelerate away. So Neuenhoff has dropped a bit back from Martino now, so maybe it's Martino's stretching his legs a bit. He can now go chase after Ely Clark. So fastest lap of the race is a 1:18.7. But last lap around, we are lapping a couple of cars on the road, so the leaders will possibly be dropping lap time. So last lap around 1:20.1. So still a scintillating pace, fastest of anyone. Second, third and fourth are in the 1:21s. So Ely Clark just has to keep it all together. Schuerkamp closes up a lot coming into the bottom section here and through the hairpin. So it looked like a lap car in the background of Schremser, whilst Martino and Neuenhoff do battle again. Neuenhoff has regrouped, and he looks like he's closing in again. So something has happened to Schuerkamp there. I'm not seeing where Andy D is as he lets the leader through. So Andy D has pulled away, so something has happened to Schuerkamp there. So Neuenhoff continues to try and chase Martinez, but we're getting sick of the sight of this Andy D at the side of the track. We didn't see if there was a smoking engine there, so was that an accident by Andy D? That's unfortunate. We've also got a Tremser is also possibly retired as well. We didn't see where on track he retired. So the mistakes starting to creep in for these drivers. Now we did see engine trouble last time for about 3 of our runners, because Buenos Aires was a track that had a lot of high-speed sections to it, so the engines would be quite strained. Monaco is slightly different, so retirements would possibly be accidents with the barriers. So an accident with the barrier, you're always going to lose. So Ely Clark currently can't see second and third behind, so stretching that gap out. So giving that chicane a very wide margin than she did in qualification, so maybe pacing herself. I don't know whether she can possibly get these medium tyres to the end, but it does depend on whether she's maybe turning the engine down, saving a little bit of fuel. Perhaps thinking about getting to the end, but perhaps she will have a little bit of margin to fit in a pit stop. So 12 laps gone. Ely Clark, Martino, Neuenhoff, Bogle, Salavaggio, Rosa, Kerr, Bolveg, Schuerkamp and Brückenmarker. That's your top 10. And that's the top 10 on the road. So it looks like Brückenmarker may have gone around at turn 1. Has got going again. That's a very interesting camera view from all the way up there. Gives you a good idea of how tight that hairpin is. So coming through the tunnel. So up to 4th gear. Down to 2nd for the chicane. So you can hear from the engine note, it doesn't seem like she's pushing on too much. Still looks scary through that part of the swimming pool chicane. Bouncing over the curbs, but just got to keep the mistakes to an absolute minimum. So if we step back to battle for 2nd, looks like Martino's maybe pulled out a little bit. So looking at last lap times, they're kind of within reach of each other. 121.0 for Martino, 121.6 for Neuenhoff just behind. So the Aras BMW is pretty strong against the Renault. It was strong at Buenos Aires as well. So now I always say in sim racing that it doesn't matter where you are on the grid normally. If you're there at the end, you can capitalize on other people's mistakes. So that's what some of these drivers have got to hope for. They need to get to the finish to get points. And points go all the way down to 12th place. So if all these drivers finish, then there will be points on the board. So if we look at our biggest winners and losers from this point of the race, it looks like Bolveg was the biggest winner from the start of the race, going up 4 places up to 8th place. Once he got past Andy D on those hard tyres, unfortunately we won't see that strategy play out because Andy D is one of our retirements. But so there weren't any losers, particularly from the cars that are running. But Bolveg was the biggest winner out of the lot. So Neuenhoff pushing on. Another push lap to get onto the back of Martino. So I don't know whether a pit stop is in the future of these two. But they seem very equally matched. So So we've got to watch out for half distance. Now, if I'm doing the maths in my head correctly, that's about lap 22-23. So all the drivers currently on track are on medium tyres as well, so who's going to save rubber? Who's possibly thinking about going to the end without a pit stop? Maybe tyre wear will be a little bit less at Monaco than it was at the faster circuit of Buenos Aires, but what did our drivers learn from the first Grand Prix of taking their tyres to the end? So Ely Clark pushing on, 18 seconds lead. Got a clear track in front at the moment. It does look like Salavaggio has got past Bogle as well. So Salavaggio now making a Renault third and fourth. So we did see a few mistakes from Salavaggio in qualification, but he's managed to keep it together and get past Bogle. So I'm going to look down my list of where everyone finished last time out. So Salavaggio on our list. Where is Salavaggio? Salavaggio finished 4th last time out. So he's 4th again today. He probably would have hoped for an improvement, but he is in 4th at the moment. So Bogle just behind in 5th. It looks like he's in Nigel Mansell's Lotus. So a good view coming around the swimming pool section. You can see the swimming pool just there. He's slightly more aggressive with the curbs than we've seen Ely Clark though. So Ely Clark seems to be in self-preservation mode, but these two here are not. So I can see 11th place coming down into pit lane. No, I cannot, because that's a retirement. I thought I saw a moving car in 11th place, but I was seeing things. It can't be. So, Borveg. Now that Andy D is not in front, he's now got a clear track in front. Seeing a spinner at the chicane. It is the Tyrrell of Prukenmacher. He's having a torrid time as he gets a swapper on coming through that part of the circuit. That car probably is not handling very well. He's going to have 2nd and 3rd in for company, as that 2nd and 3rd gets out of the way and lets them through. So Julian Kerr in the Ram Hart. He's the only driver in the Ram Hart. Coming down to the hairpin. You can see in the background there he's got some... I think that's Salavaggio that was just... No, that wasn't Salavaggio. That was possibly Neuenhoff. Or maybe maybe not. I saw someone doing like power sliding around the hairpin there. Not sure who that was. I think that's a lapped car. That was Borveg in 8th place that was doing some interesting tactics around there. So Martino still... Neuenhoff can't get any closer. We're still around the same place, so lap times are still steady around the 121 low. It's around about the leader's pace. So the leader is now dropped to 121s on lap 17. So this battle for 2nd and 3rd is possibly going to go to the end. It doesn't feel as crowded as it did in qualification. But Bogle has now found something, is now challenging Salavaggio for 4th place. It's maybe a slight mistake for Salavaggio has allowed Bogle to catch up again, get those wisps of draft. It seems like the Renault and the Lotus are pretty well matched. And we got, I think that's a lapped car just in front. That's the lapped car of Schuerkamp just in front. So this could get a little messy around this portion of the circuit. There is a short straight coming up that you could possibly let them by. He does pull to the inside, but they're not close enough to get by, so they've got to wait until possibly the tunnel. As we drop back to the battle for 2nd and 3rd. So it's a different way around. So we've got a Renault chasing this time, and back in 4th and 5th we've got a Renault trying to stave off a Lotus attack. So the Renault of Nieuwenhof still in close proximity to that Aras BMW of Martino ahead. So the lead now up to 19 seconds with 19 laps gone. We're nearly at half distance. So you see that Renault gains a lot on the straight, but that Aras BMW, that was the mistake that possibly he was looking for, side by side up the hill. That was lucky they didn't get their wheels interlocked there. That was very well judged by both of them. But slight mistake from Martino coming up the hill. I think he tried to get on the throttle way too early. Back with the battle for 4th and 5th. So mistake from Martino has meant that Nieuwenhof is now up to 2nd place. Can Martino hang on to the back of that Renault of Nieuwenhof? But Bogle is now pressuring the other Renault on track of Salavaggio. So already Nieuwenhof has been able to open that gap out a little. We saw him gaining a lot on the straights, and it was just, I felt a very I was going to say optimistic. It wasn't optimistic at all. It was opportunistic. He saw that gap open up from a slight mistake and seized his chance. He probably didn't have a better chance than that, but he was probably waiting for that for a number of laps. Slight wiggle from Bogle there. So Martino's not letting this go. He's now the chasing card. The penalty for Julian Kerr. So whereabouts is Julian Kerr on the track? So could that be another track limits violation? I'm not sure where track limits would actually apply at Monaco. Apart from maybe too many times cutting the chicane and not giving the time back, so that might be where the penalties have come from. So Martino now in the opposite position. He's got a car to chase, so rather than having the mirrors filled, you've now got the opportunity to do the same to the car or the driver in front. But you see how that Renault picks up speed through the tunnel and is able to pull out a little gap, but that Aras BMW is able to pull up to the back of that Renault in some of the tight and twisty turns. So Bogle still chasing Salavaggio. Gets his braking slightly late. He's able to gather it up and not hit anything solid. So we have Julian Kerr has popped his Ram Hart engine, so that's unfortunately our 4th retirement. Julian Kerr will unfortunately not have any points from this round. So maybe a couple of too many times hitting that rev limiter. I can't think of how many gear changes that drivers have to do around here, but the amount of engine stress puts on the cars. So that means that Schuerkamp and Pukenmacher will go up 2 positions. Now just 9 cars on the track. Right, so through the chicane. Neuenhoff. Martino has actually got by. I think that was off camera whilst I was checking other things. So Martino has been able to get by Neuenhoff again. So all that hard work done, Martino was able to repass. So Salavaggio has a penalty. That's very interesting. So that's going to drop him back. So maybe he's cut chicane far too many times. Salavaggio is going to lose this position to Bogle behind. We are at half distance, 22 laps gone. I'm just looking at the gap behind there as well, so it's not far behind Rosa as well. I think if he pits now for penalties, he might be out in front of Borveg in 7th, but that is very costly for Salavaggio. So 4th and 5th. Still nose to tail. But Bogle... Oh, that was far too aggressive on the throttle there and nearly went around, but collided with the barrier instead. I was going to say that he possibly knows that Salavaggio does have a penalty. So Ely Clark coming into the pits. So exactly at half distance. So I'm watching the track map. So the second and third are just come through the final corner now. Ely Clark is already away. So she had enough margin on the rest of the field to come into the pits, do a tyre change and come out again. So this is Martino and Neuenhoff doing battle with a lap car in front. I think that's Schuerkamp just ahead. No, that's Borveg just ahead. Nasty bump on the inside there. So this lap car may come into play. Blue flag's waving. Borveg should stay wide here. No, he cut in when, unfortunately, Neuenhoff was thinking that we would maybe let him through as well, but unfortunately not. So Neuenhoff probably a little bit displeased with that. Has dropped him back from Martino ahead. So all that hard work catching up to the back of Martino, passing him, and then being repassed. And unfortunately that lap car caused him to have a little bit of an accident. He did avoid him, so there was no damage done. But Ely Clark, first of our pit stops, is out and away and still in the lead. As if the director was listening to me. So kicking on. First lap out the pits. Trying to get those tyres all nicely warmed up. So what's going to happen to the rest of the field? Still a lead of 10 seconds over the rest of the field. So Martino can now stretch his legs a bit. He hasn't got a Renault filling his mirrors. So Bogle, after that little mishap, has dropped back from the Renault. Can't see. I'm actually seeing Salavaggio has dropped back all the way to 6th place. So did Salavaggio come into the pits, possibly serving that penalty as well? So Bogle now up to 5th. Rosa is now 4th. This is Rosa in the Tyrrell. So been going about his business. Possibly staying back a little bit, maybe saving a little bit of fuel. Salavaggio is now coming into the pits. So if that was possibly a drive-through penalty that he had to take, he's possibly now coming into the pits for a proper pit stop. So Salavaggio is going to come out the pits at the same time as the leader. I'm thinking it's going to be a little bit tight on the track map, but the leader was able to get out in front. Put a lap on 6th place. So Ely Clark has got a stranglehold on this race at the moment. Sometimes about who makes the least mistakes, particularly at Monaco. We've had a couple of penalties which I think have come from perhaps people cutting chicanes. So Ely Clark kicking on. Salvaggio in 6th place, but a lap down. Just behind the leader. So, lap 25, 20 laps to go. Ely Clark leads, Martino still in 2nd, Nieuwenhof in 3rd, Bogle in 4th. Rosa is now pitted from 4th and is now dropped to 5th. So, let's see if Salvaggio is going to overtake. I'm seeing messages coming through that it may not be easy swimming for Ely Clark. She is short on fuel, so this is perhaps why the lap times have dropped. Starting off with a 118, but now down to 120 and 121. She is desperately trying to fuel save in these last 20 laps. So I cannot remember whether these cars have refueling enabled or not. If not, then fuel saving to the end. She's got a lead of 14 seconds and she was able to put out a gap. Even desperately with fuel saving, that's a hell of a pace to be doing. Bulveg nearly gets it all wrong, managed to gather it up. Got a little bit of a swapper on coming out of that final turn, but was able to gather it up. So 8th place coming into the pit. Schuerkamp is making his pit stop. So it's always a little bit of chaos in the pit stop section. A lot of drivers deciding to pit at half distance or around about half distance. Maybe having a little bit of a shorter final stint. So if there is perhaps tyre stops, let's see. Everyone's still on medium tyres, so that is one thing that's not different from anybody else. No one decided to go for perhaps for a late stop on softs. That would be a very, very interesting strategy to do. So Martino kicking on in 2nd. 16 seconds the gap. So I'm just trying to do calculations in my head. So 16 seconds the gap. Perhaps when it gets to lap 29, that means she can lose a second a lap and still come out in front. So a lot of lifting coasting for our leader. It would be shame to throw it away on maybe accidental strategy, maybe not judging the fuel strategy correctly, or looking at the numbers and they giving the wrong readout. But Schuerkamp now out of the pits again and back in 8th place. Our penultimate driver on the grid at the moment. I'm looking at the traces up the hill. You can see that Ely Clark is completely off the throttle as she got to the top of the hill, changing down to 3rd. Let's see if we can stay with Martino coming up the hill to see if he does the same. In fact, Nieuwenhof, to see if he does the same. He's full throttle up here. No, he's not completely off the throttle, so Ely Clark is fuel saving. So maybe this race will have a nail-biting finish like we had last time. It was all down to the final 10 laps last time at Buenos Aires. Dale Bulveg still in 7th place, quite a way back from Salvaggio. Even after that, taking the penalty, it's only dropped him down to 6th place. He did have a portion, or a lot of seconds in front of Bulveg, and able to re-enter the track in that position. So didn't lose an awful lot of time, but he was probably kicking himself. So Ely Clark leads, Martino in 2nd, Nieuwenhof is catching up in 2nd. So you can see that Martino is not far ahead now. So after that little incident with the lapped car, He's now pulling up to the back of this Arrows BMW. So he has the pace. We know that that Renault is very fast in a straight line. The way that he passed Martino before was a little bit of a mistake at the bottom of the hill in turn 1. So the Arrows BMW of Martino got a little bit out of shape. And Neuenhoff was able to pass up the hill, and it was very well choreographed, but both the drivers gave each other space coming up the hill. It's a very tight place to pass, and you do need to give the other driver a lot of leeway. It's not really a straight coming up there up the hill either, so feigning to the inside. Neuenhoff now putting Martino under pressure. So there's a lapped car ahead. That's 9th place of Brückenmacher. So hopefully no such issues like last time. They're both able to get through slightly slower out the chicane. I don't think the Renault has enough acceleration to get through there, but slowed by the awkward place that he caught the lapped car. Martino was very lucky there. If that was any other place on the track, he may have been in trouble. So the Renault coming down the pit straight, not quite enough room down the inside. There is not a lot of room because of the runoff there, but the corners don't work in your favour. So Neuenhoff perhaps wants to keep it out of the barriers. You don't want any damage now in the latter half of this race. 15 laps to go. So definitely has some pace, but he's got to pick his place to pass. So I'm looking on the track map. There doesn't look like there's a lap car for a significant amount of time, so perhaps Neuenhoff has got to think of a different way to get around Martino, perhaps putting him under a little bit of pressure. Showing himself in the mid. Martino slow into the chicane again, but we know that Renault is very slow when it's trying to get away in first gear or second gear. So Martino is making all the mistakes, but Neuenhoff cannot capitalise. So quite rightly, our director is focusing on this battle between second and third. Slight mistake coming out of Anthony Nogues for Neuenhoff, because this is the best battle on track at the moment, the closest battle on track at the moment. The rest of our field has pretty much spread out. So Martino came home third last time at Buenos Aires. He was challenging for the lead for a significant number of laps last time out. But our championship leader of Story is not here today. As I said at the start, Michael Story is not here, so he will be losing points. You get 20 for first, 16 for second, and 14 for third. So points to gain for the drivers behind. We may not see a championship lead change hands today, but points to gain. This is only the third round of 7, with plenty of fast rounds to come. So the gap is now up to 1.2 seconds. Looking back to Neuenhoff. So Neuenhoff is going to regroup. Maybe have another think about how he's going to maybe put a pass on. He's had a couple of goes, but where he's been on the track, he's not being able to make a move. So going back to Bogle, back in 4th place. He's completely alone. He doesn't have anyone to challenge for 3rd place, and 5th place of Rosa is about 26 seconds behind him as well. But I can hear that Renault in the background, and you can possibly see him coming. There is the Renault. That's Salavaggio. Only 6.3 seconds behind. So just as Rosa comes out the swimming pool section, Salavaggio's coming in. So does Salavaggio fancy getting up to a top 5? 32 laps of 45. So it'd be good for Salvaggio to recover some points from that unfortunate penalty. Borveg letting the leader through. I think that's the leader. No, that's not the leader. That is Bogle ahead. No, I am mistaken. That is the leader. I'm getting mixed up between the Lotuses. So the Lotus of Ely Clark with Elio D'Angeli's helmet. Bogle is in the Nigel Mansell Lotus. So Borveg continues in 7th place. Schuerkamp in 8th. Capitalising on a few mistakes from others. Taking a very wide line coming up there. I'd imagine there wasn't a lot of grip next to the Armco there, but managed to make it stick. And our last car on the track is the Tyrrell of... Is that the Tyrrell? I think that's the Tyrrell. It's a slightly different livery from the other Tyrrell. So, Prugenmacher. I'm going to have to ask him how to pronounce his name after the race, because I'm saying it different every single time. But, so that's, still points. 9th place is still points, so just need to keep going until the end. But Martino and Neuenhoff still doing battle. I said this was going to be race long, and I wasn't wrong. So, just over 10 laps to go. Arms have got to be aching. Is fatigue going to come into it? 45 laps, 45 very fast laps around Monaco. It's got to be quite tiring. But these drivers have been nose to tail for much of it. There's only been a couple of instances where they've dropped back from each other due to lap cars or little mistakes here and there. But Neuenhoff was able to get past Martino, but just briefly. But I still want to keep an eye on Ely Clark ahead. Now the gap is up to 27 seconds. So Neuenhoff. You saw that he was gaining some speed coming up there. Bettino thought he needed to go defensive. But once they got to the chicane, there was no way through. So again, Neuenhoff has shown his hand. So Ely Clark in for another pit stop. Had the ability to come in and out and stay in the lead. So 3rd of Neuenhoff. With that Aras BMW of Martino ahead. Now it's got to regroup. Maybe have another think. Maybe he was able to push Martino into going defensive, coming down the hill towards the chicane out of the tunnel. So he's already shown his hand down there. So maybe not try that again, because he might be wary. I think Borveg has gone round. Where has he gone round? I think Borveg has gone round at the chicane. Indeed he has, coming out the tunnel. He must have got it all wrong coming down the hill, so perhaps locked the rears. And I'm seeing the battle just behind. Coming up to Borveg. So Neuenhoff looked like he braked a little bit late for that corner. So Martino is making mistakes, but Neuenhoff can't seem to pass what seems to be a very wide Aras BMW. So 10 laps remaining as the leader crosses the line. 6 drivers on the lead lap. So down to turn 1 and up the hill. Once again, we see the Renault gaining a lot coming up the hill. But nowhere to put that speed because the track does tighten. So getting closer through this section. I think Martino is possibly wise to this. So you see he purposely puts his car on the inside of the track so there's no way through. I'm hearing that Williams Honda just ahead of these two. So, through the tunnel. This is where the Renault gains. Now, where are you picking, left or right? He's gone right. And again, Martino is defending down to the inside. He knows he's weak coming through the chicane. Oh, Nieuwenhof goes round. Desperate to get on the power coming out of the chicane. He knew that was possibly his best chance. Salvaggio pitting from 6th. He had the time to do it, so he might as well. So he stays in 6th place. But meanwhile, Ely Clark came out of the pits for the second time, 16 seconds in the lead. So, Salvaggio did see that gap last time. It was 6 seconds to the car in front, but after that pit stop, he's now 19 behind. So, looks like Rosa has been able to gain places where others have faltered and up to 5th place. Meanwhile, his teammate Schuerkamp in 8th. In fact, it's not his team. No, there are 3 Tyrrells on the track. Is this one of them that's in a special livery? So, Bogle currently in 4th. Not really challenged by any cars, either in front or behind. Ely Clark battles on. Has led from the absolute start. Has not given up that lead. Pulled out a bit of a lead at the start. He's now putting in the fastest laps of the race. So, 1:18.3. That is the fastest lap of the race, so maybe fuel isn't a problem anymore. So putting down a little bit of a marker now. Doesn't really need to do qualifying laps, so got to be very, very careful. I'm seeing a yellow flag at the chicane coming down the hill. That is 4th place of Bogle. Rosa is now down to 5th. So Prukenmacher in 9th place in the Tyrrell. What I believe is one of the only other naturally aspirated cars. Salvaggio power sliding around the corner just before the tunnel. We saw a lot of that in qualification. Keeping it off the wall, but only just. That was very, very close. So we saw lap times down to the 1:16s in qualification. I'm wondering, has Ely Clark? No, Ely Clark hasn't put soft tyres on. Not doing a glory run at the end of the race, but still the lap times are coming down to 1:17.9. So Rosa down to 5th place in the Tyrrell. Tyrrells and more Tyrrells. Bogle continues in the 4th place. So challenging. He had a Renault in for company. That's a huge hit for Wolveg coming out of the first corner. I think he may have got on the throttle a little too early and he headed towards the barrier. A hell of a rate there. So through the chicane, Salvaggio 6th place. 23 seconds adrift of Rosa. I think that's a little too far back to even do anything. The closest battle on track is Nieuwenhof, but after that mistake, that costly mistake, he was putting Martino under pressure for the majority of this race. And it wasn't Martino that cracked, it was Nieuwenhof. So, Bogle circulating, keeping everything steady. And grab some good points for 4th place. So looking at my list. So Bogle had a 6th place last time out at Buenos Aires. So 2 places up on his best finish of the season. Let's hope there are a few more drivers next time out. But I'm interested to see where this is going to put the points and how it's going to change the championship. We're not even at half distance in the championship yet. And Becky Ely Clark is actually down in 5th place in the championship, so this may change things. So Ely Clark still kicking on in 1st place. The gap is now up to 31 seconds. So possibly those fast laps have now broken the car behind. So Nieuwenhof, 4.4 seconds adrift with 5 laps remaining. He's going to have to close more than a second a lap to Martino. That is doable, but it's a tall ask. So Nieuwenhof will possibly be bumped up the championship positions as well. He's currently in 8th place. So Ely Clark maybe down to something a bit more sensible. So putting in the best lap of the race, a 117.8. Now down to a 119.6. So I wonder, possibly passing a lap car, or possibly now deciding that just getting it to the finish in the final 4 laps is better than putting in fast laps. So Salvaggio still kicking on. That late pit stop and that penalty has cost him, and down to 6th place. Currently 2nd in the championship as well, so maybe a costly mistakes as well. So Bogle currently in 4th place, getting past the lap car there. So the Renaults have been strong here, only on a couple of parts of the circuit, but they've not been as nimble through some of the I was going to say sharper corners. But Nieuwenhof can still see Martino in front. He's not far away. The gap is now down to 2.9, so I did say it was a tall ask, but it's not out of the question that we're going to have a battle near the end. So a car going off on the... That's one of the Tyrrells. That is Schurekamp just getting out of the way of the leaders. So Ely Clark trapped between 2 lap cars at the moment. Doesn't want to rush it. It's got plenty of space. Blue flag showing. So I did say early on, would we find out whether there would be some Monaco specialists, and I think we found out who. So Ely Clark was half a second away in qualification from any other car. Put in that lap time quite early on in qualification, and the rest of the drivers were just playing catch up for most of the 25-minute session. But got away from the line, was hassled by Martino early on, but has not looked back. So Nieuwenhof now on the back of Martino, so we've got 2 laps. Nieuwenhof has been able to have a little bit of a think, perhaps, in those laps when he was trying to catch up to Martino. Are we about to see a battle between 2nd and 3rd in these final couple of laps of the race? Nieuwenhof knows his car is strong in a straight line. That was a bit messy. I think Nieuwenhof perhaps knew that he was car fast in a straight line through the tunnel. He doesn't want to do a spin turn because there is a car coming through. The track is clear. He's deciding to reverse down the track and do do a spin turn. So that was unfortunate. I am wondering whether the turbo kicked in at the wrong time in the tunnel, because he seemed to gain a lot of speed. Or do we think that even before the contact, Martino, perhaps, maybe his engine was ready to let go and it let go in the tunnel and perhaps collected them both. So is that going to be a retirement for Martino in the last 2 laps of this race? He is down the escape road. He's not actually retired, but that engine didn't look very healthy at all. So that means that Bogle is now up to 3rd and Nieuwenhof is now 2nd. But that may have meant that Martino, his engine possibly let go. It did seem that the closing speed was a lot different than we've seen before. So that possibly caught Nieuwenhof out. There was no real way where to go. So here was me putting all the positions on the my spreadsheet ready for the finish. It looks like things have changed, so I'm going to have to leave off until we've completely come to the end. So it's a pity that ended in an accident for Nieuwenhof and Martino, but I'll be intrigued to know late on in the race the opinions of those drivers of what actually happened. My suspect is there was an engine failure, because Martino was flat out for most of this race, possibly pushing it a little too much. So Ely Clark now on her last lap, coming down to the last part of the lap. Nieuwenhof is nearly a lap down at this point, so he will be starting his last lap. So this is the last time that Ely Clark is going to possibly come through the swimming pool section down to the chicane for probably the last time. 45 laps around Monaco. Can we call her the Queen of Monaco? Perhaps we can. So across the line we go. Ely Clark in the Lotus Renault is going to cross the line. Absolutely ecstatic for that. She's got to be very, very proud. Led from the start. Left everyone in her wake. And comes across the line with a very commanding lead. I think Thomas Rosa is congratulating her up the hill. So Nieuwenhof just coming to the end of the lap, coming through the swimming pool section. It was nearly a full lap after that accident, dropped both Nieuwenhof and Martino back. So through the final turn for Nieuwenhof, chasing an Arrows BMW for the entirety of this race, it seemed. He was probably sick of the back of it, but through the final corner and across the line, Nieuwenhof will take 2nd place on the road. Bogle is our next car on the road. So after that late accident, Bogle now comes away with a podium. So Lotus in 1st and Lotus in 3rd. So good run for the Lotuses today. So Bogle will be in 3rd place. And I believe that Rosa has already finished. So that will be all of our finishers. The rest of our drivers were lapped. So what a finish, everybody. What an absolute finish. I did say there might be a sting in the tail. I did say there might be a... it always comes down to the last 10 laps or so that something happens. But I will have a little bit of a talk with the drivers to see what exactly happened between 2nd and 3rd. It was a pity that it ended that way, but I think it was possibly something to do with an engine failure, which meant that Nieuwenhof had nowhere to go and ended up in the back of Martino. So Bogle doing a cool down lap. So early on, problems for Ely Clark. I got told that there was possibly issues with fuel consumption, but she had enough of a lead of the cars behind to be able to mediate that. So very interesting indeed. So I've got to put on my list now. I've got to put on my list of who is who and what is what, because it all changed in the final. I was putting things on my spreadsheet and then it all changed. Right, so let's look at the race session. So the provisional results, pending any problems with penalties and such. We did see a couple of penalties for a few people, maybe track limit violations, but so Ely Clark comes away with the win. That will be 20 points for Ely Clark. Nieuwenhof did come in second in the end. Bogle is in third. Looking down on my list, yes, that is him. I'm interested to know what the game does. The game does say that that Martino DNF'd there, so I'm wondering what the stewards are going to say about that. He didn't actually physically finish, so we'll possibly give him the points for 7th place for now, and I'll have to ask the stewards what they think about that one. So Bogle in third. 4th place Rosa didn't seem to have too much problem, but he was capitalizing on mistakes from other people around. So this is actually Rosa's first round in this championship, so a good finish. 4th place on the road. Salavaggio was battling with Bogle for much of this race, but unfortunately a penalty knocked him down to 6th place, but was able to get back to 5th. I think late accidents for Bolveg in 6th when he finished a little bit adrift. I'm just trying to find his name in the... There it is. So 6th for Bolveg. Vito Martino, I am going to give him points for 7th place. Points do go down to 12th. But it is just for drivers that finished. But Schuerkamp will come home in 8th. And then we have Prukamarka, our last of our finishes, in 9th. So that's the provisional order. I'm trying to find his name in the list there. So that's Leo's first round with us as well. Right, if I can total up the points. Now, I did say there might be a change in the championship positions. I'm not sure, looking at my spreadsheet. Because our championship leader, Michael Stoy, was not here today. So he dropped a maximum of 20 points. So costly. So if I've done all my spreadsheet calculations correctly, this should be the season standing. So Michael Stoy still leads the championship with 40 points. So those 2 wins at the start of the season have meant that he stays in the lead of the championship. But Ely Clark now comes up to 2nd place in the championship with 36 points. So the championship is really, really tightening up. So both of them have only been here for 2 rounds each. And they've got 2 wins for Michael Stoy and Ely Clark with 1 win and 1 2nd place. So Salavaggio now in 3rd with 32. Martino with those provisional points for 7th place is in 4th with 26, and level on points with Nieuwenhof, as if by magic. So the 2 drivers that were close together in that race are close together in the championship as well. They're level on points. So Nieuwenhof in 5th, Bogle in 6th with 22. Muller, who was not here today, is in 7th rather. He's got 18 points. Ronnie Ruger as well was not here today, has 16 points. Gianluca Giletti with 14 points. And Thomas Rosa being able to get into the top 10 with that finish today with 12 points. So, what have we got coming up? So that was the Monaco round. We are heading to Silverstone. So I'm not sure if it is the modern layout or the 1980s layout. I will have to leave it up to the admins to decide that. So either will be great. It's going to be quick at Silverstone. Are the Renaults going to be very, very quick down those straights? But I look forward to finding out. You'll see us in 2 weeks. That is right. I've done my maths correctly. So 13th of April. So you'll join us in 2 weeks So I've been your host, Neil Wood. Thank you for joining us at Sim Racer Survival. It's always good seeing these F1 1984 cars doing their thing around this circuit. Well, doing their thing around any circuit, to be honest. But join us here in 2 weeks, and we'll see what happens at Silverstone. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you later.